The year is uncertain. Somewhere between 742 and 748. In a world still reeling from the collapse of Rome, where fragmented kingdoms struggled to define themselves, a child is born into power, yet into uncertainty. His name is Charlemagne, and in time, he would reshape the destiny of Europe. The Western Roman Empire had fallen nearly 3 centuries earlier. Its roads still stretched across the continent. Its ruins still whispered of greatness. But its unity was gone. In its place rose smaller kingdoms, fragile, divided, often at war. Among them, the Frankish kingdom stood as one of the strongest. Not yet an empire, but something with potential. Charlemagne was born into the Carolingian dynasty, the son of Pepin the Short, a ruler who had already altered the balance of power by forging a close alliance with the papacy. This alliance between throne and altar would become one of the defining forces of medieval Europe. But Charlemagne's path was not destined to be solitary. When Pepin died in 768, the kingdom was divided between his 2 sons, Charlemagne and his brother Carloman. It was a fragile arrangement. Tension simmered beneath the surface. A kingdom split between ambition and rivalry. Then in 771, Carloman died suddenly. Some chronicles remain silent on the cause. Others hint at intrigue. Suspicion lingers, but certainty never arrives. What matters is this: Charlemagne became the sole ruler of the Franks. And with that, the stage was set. From the very beginning, Charlemagne's reign was defined by movement, not the quiet consolidation of power, but expansion, relentless, strategic, often brutal. His first major campaign targeted the Lombards in northern Italy. The Lombard kingdom had long threatened the papacy, and when Pope Adrian I appealed for help, Charlemagne answered, not just as a king, but as a protector of the church. In 774, after a decisive campaign, Charlemagne defeated the Lombard king Desiderius and declared himself king of the Lombards. It was a bold move. A Frankish ruler, wearing an Italian crown. Power was no longer regional. It was becoming continental. But it was in the north and east that Charlemagne's most enduring and controversial campaigns would unfold. The Saxons, a confederation of pagan tribes inhabiting what is now northern Germany, fierce, independent, and deeply resistant to external control, especially Christian rule. What followed was not a single war, but a series of campaigns spanning over 3 decades. 30 years of conflict, 30 years of rebellion, suppression, conversion, revolt again. According to the Royal Frankish Annals, Charlemagne launched repeated expeditions into Saxon territory, destroying sacred sites such as the Irminsul, a symbol of their religious identity. For Charlemagne, this was not merely conquest, it was transformation. He sought not only to rule the Saxons, but to convert them. Christianity, in his vision, was inseparable from political unity. And yet, this vision came at a cost. In 782, after a Saxon uprising, Charlemagne ordered what would become one of the most debated events of his reign, the massacre of Verdun. According to contemporary sources, approximately 4,500 Saxon prisoners were executed in a single day. Was it justice or terror Historians remain divided. Some argue it was a calculated act to crush rebellion. Others see it as evidence of the brutality underpinning his rule. Janet Nelson, a leading historian of the Carolingian period, describes Charlemagne as both a devout Christian ruler and a pragmatic warlord, a man capable of both vision and violence. And perhaps that duality defines him more than any single act. While wars raged at the edges of his realm, Charlemagne was also building something within: administration, order, structure. He understood the conquest alone could not sustain an empire. It required governance. Charlemagne divided his vast territories into counties, each governed by officials known as counts. To ensure loyalty and prevent corruption, he deployed royal agents, the missi dominici, who traveled across the empire inspecting local authorities and reporting directly to the king. It was an early form of centralized oversight, remarkably sophisticated for its time. Rosamund McKitterick, in her analysis of Carolingian governance, emphasizes that Charlemagne's system was not merely inherited, it was actively constructed. He was not just expanding a kingdom, he was designing an empire. Yet perhaps his most enduring legacy was not forged on the battlefield or in administrative halls, but in the realm of ideas. The Carolingian Renaissance, a revival of learning, culture, and intellectual life that would echo far beyond his lifetime. Charlemagne invited scholars from across Europe to his court, most notably Alcuin of York, who became a central figure in this intellectual movement. Under their influence, schools were established in monasteries and cathedrals. Latin was standardized. Manuscripts were copied and preserved. A new script, Carolingian minuscule, was developed, improving readability and consistency. It may seem subtle, but this was revolutionary, because in preserving texts, Charlemagne preserved knowledge. Many classical works from antiquity survive today only because they were copied during this period. Without this Renaissance, much of ancient learning might have been lost. And then, the moment that would define his place in history, the year 800, Rome. On Christmas Day, inside St. Peter's Basilica, as Charlemagne knelt in prayer, Pope Leo III placed a crown upon his head. He was proclaimed Emperor of the Romans. According to Einhard, Charlemagne's biographer, the king claimed he would not have entered the church had he known what the Pope intended. Whether this is true or political theater remains debated, but the symbolism was undeniable. For the first time since the fall of Rome, a Western ruler was crowned emperor, not by conquest alone, but by divine sanction. This act reshaped the relationship between church and state. It suggested that legitimacy flowed not just from power, but from God, and it raised a question that would echo through centuries. Who holds ultimate authority? The emperor or the pope? Charlemagne's empire now stretched across much of Western Europe, modern-day France, Germany, northern Italy, and beyond. It was vast, diverse, powerful, but it was also fragile, because it depended heavily on one man, Charlemagne himself. In his later years, he turned increasingly toward consolidation. Laws were codified, religious practices were standardized, efforts were made to unify liturgy across the empire. Yet beneath the surface, challenges remained. cultural differences, regional identities, the sheer scale of the territory. Could such a vast empire truly endure? On January 28th, 814, Charlemagne died in Aachen, his imperial capital. He was buried in the Palatine Chapel, a structure inspired by Roman architecture, symbolizing the continuity he sought to restore. His death marked the end of an era, but it also revealed a truth. Empires built by force and vision are not always built to last. Within a generation, the empire began to fracture. In 843, the Treaty of Verdun divided Charlemagne's realm among his grandsons, creating 3 distinct kingdoms. From this division would eventually emerge the foundations of modern Europe: France, Germany, and parts of Italy. Unity had given way to fragmentation once more. And yet, Charlemagne's legacy endured, not as a single empire, but as an idea. The idea of Europe, a shared cultural and political identity rooted in both Roman heritage and Christian tradition. Historians often refer to Charlemagne as the father of Europe. It is a title both symbolic and contested, but not without merit, because he did something few before him had achieved. He imagined Europe as a whole. But was he a unifier, or a conqueror, a visionary, or a tyrant? The answer, perhaps, lies in accepting both. Charlemagne was a product of his time, yet also ahead of it. He wielded the sword with conviction and the pen with purpose. He built schools and destroyed temples. He crowned an empire and left behind divisions. In the end, his story is not one of perfection. It is a story of transformation, of a fragmented world briefly brought together, of knowledge preserved against the odds, of power shaped by belief. And as the echoes of his reign fade into history, one question remains: what does it truly take to build a civilization? Is it force, faith, vision, or something more fragile? Something that cannot be conquered, only cultivated? Charlemagne sought to answer that question, and in doing so, he changed the course of history.